everyone, it's Alice, and today we're gonna be talking about some classics in the hope that this will inspire me to finally read these because I've had them for ages. What sparked the idea for this is that I finally picked up Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is one of those books I've had on my TBR for ages. I've mentioned it so many times that I want to read it, and I don't know, I think I just built it up in my head, and I don't know, I got a little bit scared of it. And I do that with classics a lot. And I really should just get to them because I do end up loving a lot of them when I get around to them. I did do a reading vlog about Rebecca though, which is up, and I will leave a link to it. And it was just so satisfying to read because it was getting ridiculous. Anyways, I do really like doing these kinds of videos and hearing your thoughts about the books. I love, like, in the comments when someone is like, oh my god, you gotta read this because of this and that. And I just feel like it's a nice little push. So I'm hoping that this will inspire me a little bit. I do like classic TBRs every once in a while in the hopes that I will read all of them, and I very rarely do. But maybe I'll get to some of these soonish. This is not an exhaustive list, by the way. I have many more, but we gotta start somewhere. And we're gonna start off strong with two books by Jane Austen. We have Northanger Abbey and Mansfield Park. And these are the two books that I haven't read by Jane Austen. I've read her other 4 main works, and I would just like to read them all. I discovered Jane Austen when I was in my teens, and I've sort of slowly but surely been making my way through her books, and I would just like to have read them all, and I would like it to happen soon-ish. I don't know, I'm not really running out of time, but it's just one of those things where I would like to just have read all of her books. Northanger Abbey is apparently referred to as Austen's like gothic parody, which I'm intrigued by. And I think it follows this woman who's invited to the estate of her suitor, and she loves reading like thrillers and mysterious books, and I think this place really plays with her imagination. And I don't know if she starts like seeing things or she imagines things or whatever. I don't really know what's happening, but I know she goes to this estate, and it sounds intriguing and sort of like lighthearted. I don't know where I'm really getting that from, but it just feels like one of her more lighthearted reads, maybe. Mansfield Park is again about a young woman, and I don't know a lot about this one. I know that it's about this woman who, I think her parents are poor, and so she's brought up by her rich, like, relatives, and she's always like reminded of her actual station and things like that. That's all I really know. It is a little big though, so I'm sure there's a lot more that goes on in here, but I don't know what it is. It's not like I have to rush to these, but again, I would just like to have read all of her books. I guess there is technically one more. I think it's called Lady Susan, which I don't have a copy of, but I do want to read that as well. And I would like to also start rereading these books, and I kind of want to just have read all of her 6 main works first. I don't know where I get these ideas from, but yeah. I would like to have read everything by Austen. Next, we have this book, which I have in this absolutely beautiful edition. This is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabrial García Márquez, and I've actually read a couple of books by this author, and I really like them. And I think the thing with this one is that I am scared of it because I have hyped this book up so much in my head, and I feel like I need to have like the emotional bandwidth to take it in. I don't really know what I'm basing that on. I just feel like I've just really built it up in my head. I'm actually not entirely sure what this book is about. I just have a general idea. I think it's a multi-generational story, and it's about a family that lives in this town that was founded by the family patriarch or something like that. I don't really want to know more than that. I just want to go into it and see what I find. I know that there is some magical realism in here as well. I don't know how that plays out in the story, but I am intrigued by that. And yeah, this edition is so beautiful as well. It really makes me want to read it. I do know that I like this author's writing style though, and I just feel like this is going to be a masterpiece. But I feel like I kind of need to take my time with it once I start it, and I need to sort of have the time to take my time with it. So I don't know if that's what's keeping me from it. Maybe I'm just scared. Maybe I should stop making excuses and just finally read this. Then we have Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys, and I do have a good reason for not having read this one yet. This book is about sort of the untold story of this character that we meet in Jane Eyre, and we don't really get to learn a lot about that character, and this sort of gives that character a backstory. And I would like to reread Jane Eyre before I read this, and I kind of want to read them together, and that's what's keeping me from just reading it right now. It's been quite a few years since I first read Jane Eyre. It's one of my all-time favorite classics. It's such a good book, and I just feel like I'm so far away from it. Like, it's been so long since I read it that I want to have it fresh in mind in order to read this. I don't know if that's actually necessary, but I just think it would really add to the reading experience of this. This is quite a short book though, so it shouldn't take too long. It's like 150 pages, but then Jane Eyre is a little bit of a chunkier one, so it would take me a little bit of time, but yeah. Should I read them together, or should I just read the separate? I don't know. I have a terrible memory, just so you know. I mostly can't remember anything that happens in any books. I can just remember the feeling it gave me. So I think it would be beneficial for me to read that book before this one. But then again, we don't learn a lot about that character that we're learning about in here in Jane Eyre. So maybe it doesn't matter. Moving on, we have a chunker. It's Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And this, as I'm sure you're aware of, is about this sailor or captain who is on this quest to find this whale who has bitten off a piece of his leg, I think, which is unfortunate, but who goes on a revenge mission after a whale? Now, be honest with me, is this book worth it? Because this is one of those books that I feel like I should read, and I think that the story does sound interesting because it sounds a little bit like a sort of adventure story in a way. There's a quest, and I have heard things about the story that makes me intrigued to read it, but I have also heard really mixed things about this book and how it spends ages talking about whaling, and I don't know if I'm that interested in that. Although occasionally I will read books where I don't think I'm interested in it, weird parts of the book, and then I am. But I just don't know about this one. If you've read this book though, I would love to hear what you thought, and if those whaling bits are really boring, is it possible to just skip them? Because I'm not above that. I will do that if the rest of the story is good. Then we have this, which I have in this really cool edition. This is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. And I remember I got this many, many years ago because I'd heard, I think I read an article that it was banned, and I was like, ooh, that's interesting. What scandalous stuff is in here? But it was banned in the Soviet Union, which a lot of things were banned in the Soviet Union, and I think the reason this one is because it maybe doesn't show the Soviet Union in a great light, which is fair because it wasn't that great. I'm not sure how this story plays out, and I'm not sure if I am fully grasping what it is even about, but it says that it's about the devil who pays a visit to Soviet Moscow, and I think he has an entourage with him, and in that entourage is a giant cat, which I'm assuming is this guy right here, and I am very intrigued about this cat. I wonder what's going on with that. Obviously, the devil is also interesting as a character, but really into this cat. This does sound slightly absurd and kind of weird, but I very often like those kinds of books, so I don't know what I'm gonna find in here, but I'm very interested. I have also read somewhere that this cat likes vodka and chess, so that tells you, I think, something about the vibe of the book. Next, I have a copy of a book that I actually got quite recently, so it hasn't been on my physical TBR for that long, but it's been on my mental TBR for ages. It's Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This follows this fireman who spends his days burning the most illegal of commodities, which is books. And wherever books are housed, he I think he burns down the houses or something. I don't really know how that works. But he's living in this interesting society, and he's just going about his days and doing his job, going home to his family. And then he runs into, I think, a new neighbor one day, and this neighbor really challenges his views and starts talking about the past where there was a world where these things didn't happen, and I guess that changes everything for him. I don't really know, but it sounds interesting. Obviously, a book about burning books is gonna be interesting. I do know that not everyone likes this book, but I still want to read it because I feel like even if I don't end up loving it, I'm gonna get something from it, and I'm gonna like understand the discussions around this book, which I really want to. That is one of my favorite things about reading classics, is like you feel like you unlock understanding of certain things and understanding of certain references, and I really like that about reading classics, and I think I might end up really liking this one. I have read one or two other books by Ray Bradbury, which I didn't love, but I think in this one, like, it's gonna work for me. I have a good feeling about it. Then we have another tome, which I know a lot of people love, but I am scared of the size of this, I'm not gonna lie. It's Middlemarch by George Eliot. And this is like 900 pages, and that is just a lot. Anna Karenina, which is one of my favorite books, is also 900 pages though, so I do know that I have the capacity to like them, but it's just like whenever I see this kind of book on my shelf, it's such a struggle to get started with it. This is also one of those books where I only have a vague idea of what it's about. I know that it follows a lot of characters, and I think that they all live in the same town, and through meeting all of these characters we see different perspectives on this life in this town. And that's all I really know. I do wonder how many characters are in here though, because sometimes when there's a lot of characters in books, I get a little lost, if that makes sense, because if we're switching a lot. So I don't really know how it's done in here, but a lot of people tell me that I'm gonna love this book, so I hope I will. I should just try it. My issue is also though that I am terrible at DNFing, so whenever I start a really big book, I do feel like I'm like really committing to it, and committing to this kind of book is just a lot for me. Another big book I have is this, which is not as big as Middlemarch, but it's still pretty big. It's East of Eden by John Steinbeck, and I actually have started this once. I started this like barely last year at some point, and I just immediately realized that I wasn't in the mood for it. It didn't have anything to do with the book, I just wasn't ready to start it. But I really do want to read it, and again, a lot of people recommend this damn book to me. It does sound really good though, and it sounds like a book I could really like. I think again it's a multi-generational thing, and we're following two families in California, and they're intertwined somehow. I don't know if they hate each other or love each other, or both. I don't really know, but it sounds interesting. And I've heard that this has a lot of interesting themes to it. And I have read, I think, 2 books by Steinbeck before, and I do really like the writing. I loved Of Mice and Men. Like, that is a fantastic book. So I really should read this. But again, I am scared of the size. This edition is really beautiful though. So pretty. Then we have a book by an author that I haven't read before, but I actually have 4 of her books, so I really need to get started with them. And I think I want to start with this one. This is The Sea by Iris Murdoch. This one follows a man who's famous in like the London theater scene, and he decides to retire, and he moves to this seaside town, I think, in this house, and he has decided to write his memoirs. But then throughout writing these memoirs and writing about this love affair he had with this famous woman, things get a little bit weird, and it seems like he loses it a little bit, and it's not entirely sure if it's fact or fiction. It seems like he just loses it, which is interesting. I don't know if this is the best place to start with this author, but I just feel like it is. And I have read some of her writing because I've read a little bit in the books that I got before I got them. But like I said, I have 4 of them, and I really just need to get to them. This is one of her chunkier ones though, so I don't know if this is the right place to start. It's like 600 pages. But it is beautiful, and I think the story sounds really interesting, and I think the main character sounds very interesting to read about. Second to last, we have another big one. It's The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, and this is a gothic classic, and I love those. And every fall and winter I think about this book, and I'm like, I think now is the time to read it. And then I go find it on my shelf and I look at the size of it and I'm like, maybe not right now. Besides this being a Gothic classic, I'm not entirely sure what the story is about, but again, I feel like reading this will unlock me understanding a lot of like references and things like that. I think it starts off with this drawing teacher who is in London, I think, and it's like in the middle of the night and he sees this woman dressed all in white in the middle of the street, and I think she's escaped from an asylum. And the story goes from there. What we're gonna spend 700 pages on, I don't really know. But I have a feeling that the vibes in this are gonna be really, really good. And it's gonna be a little bit spooky. I don't know if there are any supernatural elements in this, but I kind of hope there is. Maybe. We'll see. But I'm sure the atmosphere will be really good. And I do love Gothic books. So one day I'll read this, I promise. Then, lastly, we have The Makioka Sisters by Jun'ichiro Tanizaki. And do you want to guess why I haven't read this book yet? It's because it's kind of big, and I am scared of it. I know I'm going to love this book, though, which I do think adds to this feeling where I don't feel like I need to rush to get to it, because I feel like I almost like it already, but I should just read it. The story follows 4 sisters in the years right before the Second World War, I think, and they are trying to preserve their way of life. At least that's what it says. And I just feel like I'm gonna love this, mainly because it's a book about sisters, and I love reading books about sisters, and I really like there's 4 of them in here, and I hope we get to know all of them. It sounds really, really good. This is also translated, which I'm into, and yeah, I've also been recommended this book a lot, and I should just read it. How many times can I say that about books? All the time, apparently. But I really should read this. Anyways, that was the last book in my stack. Now, I would love to know if you've read these. Tell me your review, why you liked them, maybe why you didn't. If you think I would really like one of these books, I would love to hear about that as well. I do love reading classics. I just feel like I have a little bit of a mental hurdle with them sometimes, especially when they're longer. I don't really know why, but I should get over it, I feel. But if you've read any of these, tell me what you thought. That was kind of it for today. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!